All right, number 4. Pause. Some of you, I had to take points off yet again. I tried not to do it on every homework assignment just because I was catching up, so I got behind, so some of you guys didn't get reminders along the way, but I had to at least a little bit because I have talked about 4 fill-in-the-blanks to write the problem. Don't you need to give me a little bit of a summary as to the terms, okay? So some of you guys are just writing the terms. You will lose a little bit of points every time from here on out. Just give me a quick little summary. Correlation coefficient. He's the R. He says how good, basically, the linear regression fits the data. Number 6 is the constant of variation. That's our K, right? Number 18, this was like calculator worksheet all over again. Let me give you a second. Wait a minute. No. My calculator gives me Y's and X's, doesn't it? What did they do? Take the Y's and X's and think, oh, in this context, we were talking about time, and then talking about S being, what is it, sales, ticket sales? Yeah. S being, so they just made Y and X 2 different variables. You have your scatter plot, zoom stat would be helpful. You graphed your linear regression, superimposed it, that would be our handbook language. And there's the rest. Kyle, go ahead. Yes, I prefer 3, but if the directions explicitly say like 1 or 2, it's totally fine. But if the directions don't say, I always say go with 3. Wait a minute, why are they saying 1,300 million and 40.6 million? That didn't show up when you guys plugged in, did it? But according to the problem, what's the labels for the 1,300 and the 40.6? The Y's are millions of dollars. Which is great if they get it all right, but minus 0 if they get something wrong, slash, I write the right answer. Thanks, Rachel. Just put it on my desk. Okay, good to keep going? Number 26, number 50, number 54. I think all of these were translating. Oh, no. Sorry, number 26, you were actually plugging in a clue, right? Solving for K, and then there's that direct proportionality or direct variation with the clue plugged in. 50 was translating, 54 was translating. In the sense of interpreting the formula. Volume is jointly proportional to the height and the square of the radius. I guess some of you guys could have gotten a decimal for this, but pi, as much as is possible, keep it precise. Keep it just as a pi. Don't get a decimal. As soon as you go to decimals, we introduce error, and then just everything gets sad. Number 62 was a lot more than just interpret and translate, but you had to start there. You had to interpret and translate what was going on with the variations. Once you had your formulas, then you got to plug in your clues to solve for K, which they went ahead and made it this nasty fraction. I guess at this point, I mean, you have so many decimals anyway, I probably would have just gotten a decimal and then plugged it in. Let me get you that decimal really quickly just so some of you guys can grade it. Because if I were you, I would have done a decimal. A decimal would have been, do you guys agree, 0.084? Did anybody do the decimal? You could have done math and fraction. You guys know that one, right? Math and frac, and you can go to a fraction. To 24 over 287. But the decimal would have also been fine with, right here. So then 0.084. So then this also could have been B equals 0.084. PQ all over S squared. The reason why they made it a fraction is because if you already have a fraction, a decimal and a fraction is awkward. It makes more sense to use that, but either way. Another way to use it?
Is it acceptable in the test to use that number?
Oh, probably this one. Probably this one. I think in the test, I think one of these shows up on the long answer. And so I would be grading it, so I would take either one. Yeah. If there weren't decimals, it'd probably be a fraction, but since there are decimals. Okay, 72 was messy in the translation. Did you guys get that? Like the interpretation, translation part was hard? This complicated tomorrow as far as the translating goes. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it. This one was really confusing though, because they didn't give you really obvious clues. They gave you clues, but not really obvious. They were talking about the relationships between the frequencies and the tensions, the lengths of the strings, between two different notes, I think. So you had to kind of use the pattern two different ways because you were missing multiple variables, which made it hard. But ultimately you do end up with 409.95, or if you'd done 3 decimal places, it'd be a little different. Vibrations per second as far as, isn't this the one plucking the string and making a note? I think it's that one. We'll get back to 72 because I'm almost positive some of you guys have questions on it, but I did want you to see the final answer of 409.95 and at least the beginning relationship in case you didn't get that. '74 was a little weird because 74 they were saying what would happen if, they didn't give you numbers, they just said what would happen if you doubled, was it doubling the weight? Is that what W is? If you doubled the weight, if you doubled the weight and the distance, if you doubled the weight and the distance and the length, is that right? And so ultimately all you were doing was taking the original and saying what if it was a doubling the weight, a 2W instead? Ironically, that too. Why am I getting ads on my computer? We should sue. Mrs. Christensen. Okay. This 2 would come out and would end up canceling out with doubling the length, so it ended up remaining unchanged. You weren't even plugging in numbers necessarily. You were just plugging in what's going on with doubling. But if you double this and double that, well, what's 2 squared times 2? 8. Suddenly, this is now 8 times larger than it used to be. What if you double, double, double? Those 2 cancel, but now you have a 4. So it's 4 times as great. Trying to figure out how would the entire situation be affected if you affected just 1 variable or 2 variables or 3 variables. This one, if you half the distance, a half square to be a fourth, so that's what ended up happening to the entire expression, to the entire load. And I think that's the last one. So at that point, or at this point, we've graded all the evens. Some of you guys might want to start working on the review if you're like, I got homework, I'm good. But some of you guys are like, no, wait, let's camp out on 110 a little bit longer. What questions do we have? Robbie? 37. Anything earlier than 37? Okay, so going down to 37. You guys can be looking at other questions to go after 37. 37 was weird, Robbie, because it gave us points. It was like that example we did on Friday where we were trying to figure out the relationship, right? And so in the relationship, they said it's either directly proportional or inversely proportional. Let me give you another idea about directly and inversely. Directly, something you probably learned in Algebra 1. Directly is as one goes up, the other goes up. They work in tandem. Now, this isn't enough to say that every time one goes up and the other goes up, it's always directly. I can't say that. It needs to be a linear pattern where the slope is always the same and the change is always. But in general, directly, as one goes up, the other goes up. And inversely, do you guys know how this changes? As one goes up, the other goes down. We could talk about things like time and temperature. If you have temperature, like a hot coffee out on a cold day, right? As time passes, the temperature of the coffee will go down. So as time increases, temperature goes down. Or as the temperature outside goes down, Ooh, as temperature goes down, coffee goes down. Interesting. Temperature goes up, coffee goes up? Only if it's room temperature. That starts to get confusing. But in general, as one goes up, the other goes up is directly as one goes up, the other goes down. What I'm seeing here is these x's growing, 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 but what's going on to the y's? Yeah. And so in my head, I would naturally pop to the inverse one, and that's the one that I would check first. I think the directions have a little division. Sometimes the answer key gets confused. But then how could we double check and make sure we're right? Well, we could plug in some points and say, okay, so for the point 5, 1, would it work? For the point 10,